The reluctant proposal. Sofia Rodriguez stared at the final notice from the bank. The red foreclosure stamp mocking her dreams. 3 years of building her landscape architecture business, Natural Visions, now teetered on the edge of collapse. Her father's medical bills had drained her savings, and the economic downturn had scared away potential clients. Rain pelted the windows of her small office as Sofia calculated how much longer she could keep the lights on. 2 weeks, maybe 3, if she skipped meals again. The phone hadn't rung in days, until it did. Natural Visions. This is Sofia, she answered, trying to sound confident rather than desperate. Ms. Rodriguez. The male voice was deep, controlled. My name is Darius Kane. I require your services. Sofia nearly dropped the phone. Darius Kane, the notorious real estate developer whose modern estates dotted the coastline, was calling her directly. His reputation preceded him: brilliant, exacting, and utterly merciless in business. Yes, of course, Mr. Kane. How can I help you? I've reviewed your portfolio. Your work on the Westlake Botanical Gardens was adequate. I'm renovating my private estate and require a complete landscape redesign. The property is 7 acres. Sofia's heart raced. A project that size could save her business and pay off her debts. I'd be happy to schedule a consultation tomorrow, 9 a.m. And Ms. Rodriguez. This isn't a consultation. It's an interview. The line went dead before she could respond. Sofia arrived at the imposing iron gates the next morning, her portfolio clutched to her chest. Having spent the night researching everything she could about Darius Kane, 42 years old, self-made billionaire, no wife, no children, no personal life that anyone knew of, just an empire built on transforming neglected properties into luxury developments. The estate was breathtaking yet oddly sterile. Perfectly maintained gardens with not a flower out of place, but lacking any personality, like a model home no one actually lived in. A stern-faced housekeeper led her to a sunroom overlooking the property. Darius Kane sat with his back to her, reviewing documents. You're 3 minutes early, he said without turning around. I value punctuality, Sofia replied, straightening her shoulders. He finally turned, and Sofia was struck by the intensity of his dark eyes and the complete absence of warmth in them. His face might have been handsome if not for its perpetual severity, like someone who had forgotten how to smile. Tell me why I should hire you when I could have any landscape architect in the country. Sofia opened her portfolio. Because I don't just create gardens, Mr. Kane, I create experiences, memories. Your estate is technically perfect but has no soul. I can give it life. Something flickered across his face: annoyance, interest. It vanished too quickly to tell. Bold words from someone whose business is failing. The blunt statement stung, but Sofia refused to flinch. My financial situation doesn't affect my talent or vision. Darius walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. The project must be completed in 6 weeks. Before an important event I'm hosting. Your fee will be double your standard rate. Sofia's breath caught. That kind of money would solve everything. However, he continued, I require exclusivity. You work only on my project. No other clients. You'll have a suite here on the property. I expect your complete focus until completion. That's unusual, Sofia said cautiously. Is it a problem? His tone suggested the meeting would end immediately if she objected. No, but why? I don't explain myself, Ms. Rodriguez. I make offers. You accept or decline. Everything in Sofia's rational mind screamed caution. Living on his property, working exclusively for a man known for discarding contractors who displeased him, yet the alternative was losing everything she'd built. What exactly do you want for your gardens, Mr. Kane? He turned back to her, expression unreadable. Something impossible. I wanted to feel like coming home. The request seemed strange coming from him, a man who lived in clinical perfection. And if I accept these terms? Sofia asked. Darius handed her a contract, already prepared. Then we begin immediately. One more condition: this arrangement remains strictly professional. I've found emotions complicate business matters. As Sofia skimmed the generous terms, she noticed his hands strong but with a slight tremble he quickly hid by placing them in his pockets. Do we have a deal, Ms. Rodriguez? He asked. Sofia extended her hand. We have a deal, Mr. Kane. Neither realized that the contract they signed that rainy morning would bind far more than just their professional lives. Seeds have changed. First week at Darius Kane's estate proved more challenging than Sofia had anticipated. Every morning, she woke at dawn in her luxurious guest suite, a beautiful prison of marble and silk, and worked until the stars emerged. Her designs, typically met with client enthusiasm, faced Darius's clinical scrutiny and frequent rejection. These flowering trees are impractical. They'll shed petals everywhere, he commented during their third design review, standing in his immaculate office. That's rather the point, Mr. Kane, Sofia countered, fatigue making her bolder than wisdom suggested. Gardens aren't meant to be sterile. They're meant to change, grow, surprise you with unexpected beauty. Darius's jaw tightened. I prefer predictability, even at the cost of joy. The words escaped before she could reconsider. His dark eyes locked with hers. For a moment, Sofia glimpsed something beneath his controlled exterior, not anger, but a flicker of unresolved pain. Then it vanished, sealed behind his professional mask. "You weren't hired for philosophical debates, Ms. Rodriguez. You were hired for your expertise. Apply it within my parameters." Sophia bit back her frustration. That evening, she wandered the vast property alone, seeking inspiration and escape from Darius's suffocating demands. Near the eastern boundary, she discovered an overgrown area hidden behind tall hedges, a stark contrast to the manicured perfection of the rest of the grounds. Within this forgotten corner stood a weathered stone bench, beneath a gnarled apple tree. Unlike the rest of the estate, this spot felt lived in, cherished even in its neglect. Fallen apples dotted the ground, their sweetheart scent filling the air. The next morning, Sophia confronted Darius as he reviewed property documents over breakfast. "Why wasn't I shown the orchard area during the property tour?" Darius's hand froze halfway to his coffee cup. "That area isn't part of the renovation, but it's the only part of your garden with any character," Sophia pressed. "Everything else feels like it was designed by committee. That little orchard feels like someone actually loved it. It's not relevant to your work." His tone was final, brooking no argument. Undeterred, Sophia placed her revised designs before him. "I've incorporated elements inspired by that space throughout the new landscape plan. The contrast between structure and wildness creates balance." Darius frowned at the drawings. "This isn't what we agreed upon." "No, it's better," Sophia said quietly. "You asked for a garden that feels like coming home. That orchard is the only place on your property that already does." Something shifted in his expression, surprise perhaps, that she had observed so carefully. Without another word, he rose and walked out, leaving Sophia uncertain whether she'd just been fired. That afternoon, as Sophia supervised the delivery of stone pavers, Darius's housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, approached with a tray of lemonade for the workers. "You found the old orchard," she said, her statement carrying the weight of an accusation. "I did," Sophia admitted. "Mr. Kane wasn't pleased that I mentioned it." Mrs. Chen's severe expression softened slightly. "That orchard was his mother's pride. She planted those trees when he was a boy. It was where they would read together every Sunday afternoon." Sophia absorbed this information about the seemingly detached businessman. What happened to her? "Cancer. 15 years ago, after the funeral, Mr. Kane ordered the entire property redesigned. Everything except that orchard." Mrs. Chen lowered her voice. "Though he hasn't set foot in it since. At least, not that anyone's seen." This glimpse into Darius's past shifted something in Sophia's understanding of the man. That evening she revised her designs again, working until midnight to balance his desire for order with subtle elements that might reawaken forgotten memories of comfort. The following morning, Sophia found Darius standing at the edge of the orchard, his tall figure silhouetted against the rising sun. She approached cautiously, expecting dismissal. Instead, he spoke without turning. "My mother called this her thinking garden. She said real gardens should be a little wild, like real people." "She sounds wise," Sophia replied gently. She was a pause. "Your revised designs, the curved pathways, the hidden seating areas, they reminded me of how she would design spaces, not just for show, but for living." Sophia remained silent, sensing the rarity of this moment of openness. Finally, Darius turned to face her. "Proceed with the new designs, but the orchard remains untouched." "What if," Sophia suggested carefully, "instead of leaving it untouched but ignored, we made it the heart of the new design, not changing it, but celebrating it?" For the first time since they'd met, Darius's expression held uncertainty rather than command. "I'll consider it." As work progressed over the next 2 weeks, Sophia noticed subtle shifts in their interaction. Darius began joining her for site walks, initially offering curt feedback but gradually engaging in actual conversations. He questioned her choices, not to dismiss them but to understand her vision. One evening, as they reviewed progress near a newly installed reflection pool, a spring shower caught them unprepared. They raced to the shelter of a half-constructed pergola, arriving breathless and damp. To Sophia's astonishment, Darius laughed, a rusty sound, as if long unused, but genuine. A droplet of rain traced the line of his jaw, humanizing his usually perfect appearance. "You have soil on your face," he said, reaching out before catching himself, hand falling awkwardly to his side. "Occupational hazard," Sophia replied, suddenly aware of their proximity in the small shelter. "You should try it sometime. Getting your hands dirty might be good for you, perhaps." His eyes held hers a moment longer than necessary. "Though I have experts like you for that." "Some experiences shouldn't be delegated, Mr. Kane." "Darius," he corrected quietly. "After all, you're reshaping my home. Perhaps some formalities can be set aside." As the rain drummed on the partially completed roof above them, Sophia realized that more than the landscape was being transformed. Seeds of change had been planted in the barren soil of Darius Kane's carefully controlled world, and against all expectations, they were beginning to take root. Storms. Within 3 weeks into the project, nature decided to test Sophia's designs with an unseasonable downpour that threatened to wash away newly planted beds and half-finished stonework. The morning sky darkened to an ominous charcoal as workers scrambled to secure tops over vulnerable areas. The weather service is upgrading this to a potential subtropical storm, Sophia informed Darius as they stood in his study, watching sheets of rain lash against the windows. We've stabilized what we can, but I'm concerned about erosion on the eastern slope. Darius nodded, his face a mask of calm belied only by the tension in his shoulders. Send the workers home. No point risking their safety. I should stay to monitor. We'll both monitor, he interjected. When Sophia raised an eyebrow, he added, It's my property at risk, Ms. Rodriguez. Sophia, she corrected with a slight smile. After all, we're about to wade through mud together. Perhaps some formalities can be set aside. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close enough. As afternoon faded into evening, the storm intensified. Wind howled through the trees, and lightning split the sky in jagged bursts. Dressed in raincoats and boots, they made regular circuits of the property, securing loose materials and adjusting drainage channels during a particularly fierce gust. A large branch crashed down from an old oak, narrowly missing Darius. Without thinking, Sophia grabbed his arm and pulled him back. For a moment they stood too close, her hand still clutching his sleeve, his breath warm against her rain-spattered face. That was close, she said, releasing him as if burned. Yes, his voice sounded different. Thank you. By nightfall, they were soaked and exhausted. The main house had lost power, and the estate was illuminated only by emergency generators and flashes of lightning. In the kitchen, Sophia toweled her hair dry while Darius built a fire in the adjacent hearthroom. The forecast says it will pass by morning, she said, accepting the mug of hot tea he offered. But I'm worried about the drainage system by the orchard. The old channels might not handle this volume. Then we should check it, he said simply. Armed with flashlights and rain gear, they ventured back out into the tempest. The wind nearly knocked Sophia off her feet as they made their way to the orchard. Darius instinctively steadied her, his hand remaining at the small of her back as they navigated the slippery path. The orchard was in chaos, leaves and small branches scattered everywhere, water pooling dangerously around the roots of the oldest trees. Together they worked to clear blocked drainage channels, digging through mud with their hands when tools proved insufficient. This one's your mother's favorite, isn't it? Sophia asked over the storm's roar, gesturing to the ancient apple tree they were working to save. Darius froze. How did you? The way it's positioned, the stone bench, the view it has of the sunrise. Sophia shrugged. It would have been my favorite. Something shifted in Darius's expression, a crumbling of defenses. She'd sit here for hours, sketching or reading. Said she could feel the generations of the tree's life in its bark, as they created makeshift barriers to divert water from the tree's vulnerable roots. Darius continued speaking, his voice barely audible above the storm. The last time I saw her conscious, she made me promise to take care of her garden. I couldn't bring myself to come here after, so I redesigned everything else instead. Made it perfect, controlled, the opposite of dying. The raw admission hung between them as they worked side by side, mud-covered and drenched. Perfect isn't always living though, is it? Sophia said gently. No. His admission was so quiet she almost missed it. It isn't. When the immediate danger to the orchard had passed, they retreated to the shelter of a small gardener's cottage nearby, closer than returning to the main house. The one-room structure was simple but dry, with a wood stove that Darius quickly lit. In the dancing firelight, with rain drumming on the roof, the pretense of mere professional association seemed to wash away with the mud they cleaned from their hands. You never explained, Sophia said, wrapping a found blanket around her shoulders, why this deadline is so important. What event requires the gardens to be finished in exactly 6 weeks? Darius stared into the fire, his profile sharp against the warm light. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. The anniversary of her death, he finally said. 15 years, I haven't commemorated it properly, not once. This year I wanted to create something worthy of her memory. Not just a garden that feels like coming home, Sophia realized aloud, but a homecoming itself. He nodded, eyes still fixed on the flames. Foolish, perhaps. No, Sophia contradicted softly. It's the most human thing you've done since I met you. The storm outside seemed to mirror the one Sophia could see breaking within him, years of controlled grief finally finding release. When he looked up, the firelight revealed a dampness in his eyes that had nothing to do with the rain. I've spent 15 years building an empire that she'll never see, he confessed, becoming someone she might not recognize. Sophia moved closer, drawn by the naked vulnerability she'd never expected to see in this man. I think she'd recognize the part of you that saved her orchard tonight. His hand found hers in the dim light, a tentative connection, calloused fingers against mud-streaked skin. I don't know how to be that person anymore, he admitted, the one who cared about more than contracts and bottom lines. I think you do, Sophia whispered. You're just out of practice. The air between them charged with something neither had anticipated when signing their business arrangement. For a breathless moment, the line between client and designer blurred, replaced by simpler, more ancient roles, just a man and woman, seeking shelter from the storm. Darius leaned forward slightly, then caught himself. Professional boundaries reasserted themselves like a physical barrier. We should rest, he said, withdrawing his hand. Tomorrow will require substantial cleanup. Sophia nodded, ignoring the hollow feeling in her chest. Of course, they settled on opposite sides of the cottage, wrapped in found blankets, the wood stove between them. But as the storm raged outside, Sophia found herself watching Darius's face in repose, finally peaceful in sleep. The man who emerged tonight, vulnerable, caring, human, was someone she hadn't been contracted to meet, yet found herself increasingly drawn to. As dawn broke, revealing a landscape transformed by the storm's fury, Sophia realized something else had fundamentally changed overnight. What had begun as a business transaction had sprouted unexpected roots, ones that might prove impossible to uproot when their contract ended. Blooming aftermath of the storm brought unexpected clarity to the estate. Debris littered the grounds, but the skeleton of Sophia's design remained intact, proving the soundness of her vision. More surprising was the transformation in Darius himself. The rigid businessman now rolled up his sleeves alongside the workers, helping clear fallen branches and reset dislodged stones. "You don't have to do this," Sophia remarked, watching him haul a wheelbarrow of mulch across the lawn. "That's what you're paying the crew for." "Perhaps I want to get my hands dirty," he replied, echoing her earlier words with the ghost of a smile. In the weeks following the storm, their relationship evolved into something neither had anticipated. Their conversations extended beyond work discussions into personal territories, childhoods, dreams, disappointments. Darius began joining Sophia for lunch, sometimes bringing books to share or asking her opinion on matters unrelated to landscaping. The gardens, meanwhile, transformed from sketches to reality. The orchard, once isolated, now formed the heart of the design, with pathways spiraling outward like embracing arms. Sophia incorporated elements that honored the estate's history, while creating spaces for new memories. A tea pavilion overlooking the valley, a moonlight garden with night-blooming flowers, secluded benches that invited quiet contemplation. "It's becoming more than I imagined," Darius admitted one evening as they walked the grounds at sunset. "Not just aesthetically pleasing, but alive," Sophia offered. He nodded. "Exactly that." As the 5th week began, with a deadline approaching, Sophia found herself working late into the night, determined to perfect every detail. During one such evening, she discovered a leather portfolio in the study while searching for reference materials. Inside were architectural drawings not for the garden, but for a children's hospital wing. The proposed building incorporated natural elements and healing gardens remarkably similar to concepts she'd designed for the estate. "You found them." Darius's voice from the doorway startled her. She hadn't heard him enter. "I wasn't snooping," she began, but he waved away her concern. "The Elaine Kane Memorial Pediatric Wing," he explained, moving beside her to view the drawings. "My mother was a pediatric oncologist. Helping children was her life's work." Understanding dawned on Sophia. "The important event, it's not just commemorating her death, is it? You're announcing this project." "The groundbreaking ceremony will be held here," Darius confirmed. "The board members, donors, and several of her former patients will attend. I wanted to show them that her spirit lives on, not just in the hospital, but here where she found peace." "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia asked. "This context would have informed my design from the beginning." Darius's expression softened. "Initially, the garden was simply a necessary backdrop for the announcement. But then you started asking questions about home and belonging, and I realized my mother would have wanted more than a perfect setting. She would have wanted a living tribute." He moved closer, his hand brushing hers as he turned a page in the portfolio. "Your vision helped me see that." The air between them thickened with unspoken emotions. Sophia was acutely aware of his proximity, of how their professional relationship had evolved into something neither had planned for. "Darius," she began carefully, "when this project ends next week, let's not discuss endings yet," he interrupted gently. "There's still much to complete." But his eyes told a different story, one of reluctance to address what would happen when their contract concluded. Would she simply leave? Would he let her go? As the week progressed, Sophia threw herself into finalizing the gardens, trying to ignore the growing ache at the thought of leaving. Workers installed lighting, set the last stones, and planted the final arrangements under her supervision. The evening before the ceremony, Sophia found Darius in the orchard, standing beneath his mother's apple tree. Lanterns illuminated the space, casting warm light across the gardens that had become not just her professional achievement, but a piece of her heart. "It's finished," she said softly. He turned. The expression on his face made her breath catch, wonder mixed with something deeper, more personal. "Not quite," he replied. "There's one element missing." From his pocket, he withdrew a small weathered tin box. This was hers, seeds she collected from her travels. "I thought perhaps we could plant them together. A promise for future seasons." The word "we" hung between them, laden with possibility, as they knelt together in the soft earth, planting seeds, whose blooms they could only imagine. Sophia realized that what had grown between them might be the most unexpected garden of all, one she wasn't contracted to create, yet couldn't bear to abandon. Beyond the contracts, the morning of the ceremony arrived with perfect blue skies, as if nature itself approved of their creation. Sophia watched from her suite window as workers arranged chairs on the lawn and caterers prepared for the afternoon reception. Her suitcases stood packed by the door, a stark reminder that their arrangement had reached its conclusion. The final payment had been processed, the contract terms fulfilled. By all professional standards, it was time to leave. Yet her heart, they rebelled against the idea of walking away from what she'd built here, not just the gardens, but the unexpected connection with a man who had slowly revealed himself to be more than the cold businessman she'd first met. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Chen entered, carrying a box and an envelope. From Mr. Kane, the housekeeper explained. Her usually stern expression softened with something like approval. Inside the box lay a delicate silver pendant in the shape of an apple blossom. The card simply read, "For memories planted. Join me in the orchard before guests arrive." Sophia found Darius beneath the ancient apple tree, dressed for the ceremony in a tailored suit that somehow didn't mask the man she'd come to know, the one who knelt in mud during storms and planted seeds in moonlight. "The gardens look magnificent," he said as she approached. "You've exceeded every expectation." "Thank you for the pendant," she replied. "It wasn't necessary. Few necessary things are truly important." He gestured to the bench. "Sit with me." A moment. As they settled side by side, Sophia felt the weight of imminent farewell. "The hospital project is beautiful, Darius. Your mother would be proud, perhaps." His gaze swept across the transformed landscape. "But I've realized something these past weeks. I've been so focused on honoring her memory that I forgot her most important lesson, that life must be lived forward, not preserved in amber." He turned to face her fully. "Watching you work, seeing how you infuse everything with possibility rather than mere perfection, I've remembered what it means to imagine a future, not just commemorate the past." Sophia's heart quickened. "What are you saying?" "Your contract ends today," he stated, voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "But I find myself reluctant to conclude our association." "Professional association?" she asked carefully. "No." His hand found hers on the bench between them. "Something far less easily defined by legal terms." In the distance, cars began arriving for the ceremony. Their moment of privacy was drawing to a close. "I have a new proposal," Darius said, his usual confidence giving way to rare uncertainty. "Not a contract, but an invitation. Stay not as my landscape architect, but as my guest. Help me learn to tend what we've planted here, in all senses of the word." Sophia studied his face, the face of a man who had begun the project as a stranger, and now felt like someone she'd always known. "That's quite an open-ended arrangement you're suggesting." "I'm discovering I prefer some aspects of life unplanned," he admitted with a small smile, "though I understand if you have other commitments waiting." Sophia thought of her struggling business, of the freedom Darius's payment had bought her, freedom to choose her next steps without desperation driving her decisions. "I'd need my own space," she said carefully. "A real relationship can't flourish in an employer's guest suite." Hope brightened his eyes. "Of course. And I have projects to rebuild, clients to reconnect with." Naturally, his thumb traced circles on her palm. "I wouldn't ask you to abandon your work, only to consider making space in your life for possibilities we haven't explored." Before she could respond, the sound of approaching voices signaled the ceremony was about to begin. Darius stood, reluctantly releasing her hand. "I should greet the guests," he said. "Will you join me?" As they walked together toward the gathering crowd, Sophia contemplated his invitation. 6 weeks ago, she'd arrived desperate for a contract that would save her business. Now, she was considering an agreement of an entirely different nature, one without clear terms or end dates, messy with emotions rather than sterile with professional distance. The ceremony unfolded beautifully. Darius spoke movingly about his mother's legacy and the healing gardens that would offer comfort to children battling illness. Throughout his speech, his eyes frequently found Sophia's in the audience, acknowledgement of how her vision had shaped not just the landscape but his perspective. When the formal proceedings concluded and guests mingled through the gardens, Sophia found herself approached by several board members impressed with her work. "We'd love to discuss incorporating similar elements in the hospital grounds," one trustee told her, handing over a business card. "Mr. Kane speaks very highly of your vision." By sunset, the guests had departed, leaving the lantern-lit gardens in peaceful silence. Sophia found Darius at the reflecting pool, loosened tie in contemplative expression suggesting both satisfaction and uncertainty. "Congratulations," she said, joining him. "Today was everything you hoped for." "Almost everything," he responded, studying her face. "I'm still waiting on one answer." Sophia took a deep breath, knowing her response would change the course of both their lives. "I won't stay in your guest suite." Disappointment flickered across his features. "But," she continued, "there's a cottage at the edge of the property that would make a perfect studio for my business. Close enough for dinner invitations, far enough for independence." Hope returned to his eyes. "The old groundskeeper's cottage, it needs renovation. And I have projects to rebuild, clients to reconnect with." Naturally, his thumb traced circles on her palm. "I wouldn't ask you to abandon your work, only to consider making space in your life for possibilities we haven't explored." Before she could respond, The sound of approaching voices signaled the ceremony was about to begin. Darius stood, reluctantly releasing her hand. "I should greet the guests," he said. "Will you join me?" As they walked together toward the gathering crowd, Sophia contemplated his invitation. 6 weeks ago, she'd arrived desperate for a contract that would save her business. Now, she was considering an agreement of an entirely different nature, one without clear terms or end dates, messy with emotions rather than sterile with professional distance. The ceremony unfolded beautifully. Darius spoke movingly about his mother's legacy and the healing gardens that would offer comfort to children battling illness. Throughout his speech, his eyes frequently found Sophia's in the audience, with acknowledgement of how her vision had shaped not just the landscape but his perspective. When the formal proceedings concluded and guests mingled through the gardens, Sophia found herself approached by several board members impressed with her work. "We'd love to discuss incorporating similar elements in the hospital grounds," one trustee told her, handing over a business card. "Mr. Kane speaks very highly of your vision." By sunset, the guests had departed, leaving the lantern-lit gardens in peaceful silence. Sophia found Darius at the reflecting pool, loosened tie and contemplative expression, suggesting both satisfaction and uncertainty. "Congratulations," she said, joining him. "Today was everything you hoped for." "Almost everything," he responded, studying her face. "I'm still waiting on one answer." Sophia took a deep breath, knowing her response would change the course of both their lives. "I won't stay in your guest suite." Disappointment flickered across his features, "But," she continued, "there's a cottage at the edge of the property that would make a perfect studio for my business. Close enough for dinner invitations, far enough for independence." Hope returned to his eyes. "The old groundskeeper's cottage. It needs renovation. I know a talented designer who might help," she teased, "for the right terms." Darius stepped closer, professional distance finally and completely abandoned. "And what terms would those be?" "Honesty, patience." Sophia met his gaze steadily. "No exclusivity clauses. We both have lives and work beyond each other, and the understanding that whatever grows between us should be tended, not controlled." "Those terms are acceptable," he murmured, and hands gently framing her face. As their lips met beneath the star-filled sky, Sophia realized that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow not from careful contracts, but from the brave decision to plant possibility in fertile ground, the patience to let it bloom in its own perfect time.